70,000 years ago, East Africa, night by the fire. Something had changed. Not today, not yesterday, not in a single moment. But it had changed. The group sits by the fire. This had always been there, sitting by the fire at night. It was there with Erectus. It was there with the Neanderthal. It was there with the earliest sapiens. Fire, a circle of people. Darkness outside. But now, one of them speaks. Not simply making sounds. Not warning of danger. Not calling to food. Not expressing pain or joy. He is telling them about something that is not here. About what happened 3 days ago. About the river beyond the hill, which they do not see right now. About a herd of animals he saw. Alone, far away. And wants the others to know about. Not so they can go there immediately. Simply so they know. The others listen and understand. That is what changed. What language really is. We say language and think of words. Grammar, sentences, the sort of thing taught in school. But language as a biological phenomenon is something else. It is the ability to create arbitrary symbols and use them to transmit meaning. Arbitrary means not connected to what they refer to by any physical necessity. The word river does not resemble a river. It does not sound like a river. It does not smell like a river. It is connected to a river only because we agreed it was. It is an agreement, a convention. That is a revolution. Before language, everything that could be transmitted had to be either demonstration or pointing, or a sound that directly conveyed a state. A cry of pain, a growl of threat, a call. With language, anything can be transmitted. Not only what is here right now, not only what can be pointed at with a finger, but what is absent. What was, what will be, what might have been, what exists only in the mind. It is an infinite expansion of what can be communicated. And it changed everything. When? The honest answer is that we do not know exactly. Language leaves no direct traces in geological layers. Words do not preserve the way bones or tools do. There is no first word carved into stone. But there is indirect evidence. Anatomy. The hyoid bone, a small U-shaped bone in the throat, the only bone in the skeleton not connected to any other. Part of the hyoid apparatus, important for speech. In the Neanderthal from Kabar Cave, 60,000 years old, the hyoid bone is almost identical to ours. That suggests the anatomical capacity for speech was there. But having the anatomy is not the same as having language. All the necessary organs may be in place, and language may still not exist. Tools. Tool complexity is an indirect marker. Technology that requires transmission across generations, requires explanation, requires description, probably requires language. The appearance of symbolic objects. Shell beads, 75,000 years old in South Africa. Ochre with traces of deliberately applied patterns. Eagle claws used as ornaments by Neanderthals. Genomics. The FOXP2 gene, the so-called speech gene. Mutations in it in humans cause severe impairments of speech and language. Other animals have similar versions, but ours is different. Interestingly, Neanderthals, judging by ancient DNA, had the same version of FOXP2 that we do. That is another indication that they may have been able to speak. Most researchers agree that full language, language with grammar, with recursion, with the ability to speak about what does not exist, appeared in Homo sapiens. Exactly when remains disputed. Dates from 200,000 to 50,000 years ago are proposed. For our scenario, 70,000 years ago, a moment now called the behavioral revolution, a sharp acceleration of innovation in African sapiens populations. New technologies, new kinds of ornaments, symbolic objects, art. Something changed in the brain, or in social practice, or in both. And language is the main candidate for the role of catalyst, sound. Let us return to the night by the fire. The human being speaks. The sounds of his speech are not what we are used to. Our language, any modern language, is the product of thousands of years of development, refinement, change. That language is simpler. Shorter sentences, fewer words, more limited grammar. But it works. The listeners understand. Not because they are smarter than us or less smart than us, the brain is already the same, already ours. But because the vocabulary is still smaller, because the language is only taking shape, because many things we express with one word require them several gestures and sounds. But they understand that there was a herd of animals. Where? Roughly how many? The direction of movement. That changes what they will do tomorrow. Information that came from one person changed the behavior of the group, without everyone seeing the herd. Without anyone pointing and saying, look, simply through sounds, through words, through language. That is the power of language. That is what did not exist before. Time. Language does something very concrete to time. Before language, the world exists in the present, or in the very near past and future, within the range of what the body remembers and what the body expects. A tiger frightened you yesterday. The body remembers fear. A hunt tomorrow, the body prepares. But 3 days ago I saw a herd by the river beyond the hill is something else. It is a past that is not stored in the body as the trace of direct experience. It is information transmitted through language, now existing in several minds, influencing action not through reflex but through understanding. And in a week the rainy season will begin, and we need to move north. That is a future that exists nowhere except in language. There is no smell of rains that says soon, no sound that warns in a week. It is an abstract future, accessible only through words. Language stretched time. It made available what had been and what would be, not only what is right now. And that is an enormous strategic advantage. A group that can discuss past events and plan the future makes better decisions, accumulates more knowledge, adapts faster, survives better. There. One of the first and most important words in any language is a word pointing to a place that is not in view. There. Beyond the hill. Far away. Where we were before. This is not just a word. It is a concept of absent space. Space that exists even when you do not see it. That sounds obvious. Of course, the river beyond the hill exists even when you do not see it. We believe this automatically. It seems self-evident. But it is not self-evident. Philosophers call it object permanence. In infants, before a certain age, objects that disappear from view seem to cease to exist. Then this develops. The object continues to exist even when unseen. This is a cognitive shift. Language stabilizes this shift, makes it shared, makes it possible to speak about what is not before the eyes and trust that the other person understands what is meant. That river beyond the hill means the same thing for both. This is a shared representation of the absent world. It is the foundation of geography, the foundation of cartography, the foundation of any planning that extends beyond the immediate surroundings. Remember, the second essential word or concept is an appeal to shared memory. Remember when we were at that river 2 seasons ago. This is not simply recollection. It is an invitation for another person to share your memory. It is the creation of a common past, a past belonging not to one person, but to several. This is collective memory. Before language, each person has only his own memory, his own experience that can be shown, but not described, shared through living it together, but not through narration. With language, memory becomes collective. One person remembers one thing, another remembers another. Together they remember more than either does alone, and that more is available to each of them, through conversation. This is the first external memory, not inside one person's brain, in the space between people, in language, in conversation. This is what later grows into writing, then libraries, then the internet. All of these are different forms of storing collective memory outside a single brain. All of these begin with remember when we were at that river. Why? But the most revolutionary word is why. Not what, not where, not who. Why? Why did the deer leave this place? Why did this person become ill? Why did the nights grow longer? Why did those people attack us? The question why requires causal thinking. It requires the search for explanations. It requires the understanding that events have causes, that the world is not random. that there are patterns in it that can be understood. This is the birth of explanation. Before why, one can react. One can adapt. One can do what works and avoid what does not, through experience and error. With why, one can build models. One can explain. One can transmit not only do it this way, but do it this way because. And because is an enormous step. Because it means the possibility of applying knowledge in new situations. Not simply hunting works in this place, but hunting works because animals come to water in the morning. And that means that at any water source, animals can be expected in the morning. Generalization. Principle. Pattern. This is the seed of science. Literally the same type of thought, only developed over thousands of years, and later equipped with methodology. A name. There is one more word that changed everything. A name. When a person has a name, he becomes himself, not simply a member of the group, not simply the one who hunts well or the one who has children, but a specific, unique, named being. A name is the first expression of individuality in language. And it changes relationships. Before names, one can point, one can indicate, one can make a sound, meaning a particular person. But that sound is tied to the person being physically present nearby. With a name, one can speak about a person when he is absent. One can transmit information about a specific person to another specific person through language. He said that. She saw that. When he returns. This is a person existing in language, not only in the body and in immediate presence, but in words. And that means the person survives death. In words. He was a good hunter. He died over there by the river last season. He taught me how to do this. The dead continue in language. This is the first immortality. Not real immortality, not eternity, but existence after the death of the body. In the memory of others, sustained by language. Exactly from this come all traditions of speaking the names of the dead, reading the names of the fallen, saying we remember, creating gravestone inscriptions, preserving stories. All of it begins with his name was. Gossip. There is one theory of the origin of language that sounds strange, but has serious foundations. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed that language grew out of social grooming, from the need to maintain social bonds in larger groups. Chimpanzees maintain bonds through physical grooming, picking through one another's fur. This takes a significant part of their time. But among chimpanzees, groups rarely exceed about 50 individuals. There is simply not enough time to maintain more relationships through grooming. When human groups became larger, physical grooming was no longer enough. There was not enough time to physically reaffirm a bond with every important member of the group. Language solved this. Vocal grooming, conversation, can be done with several people at once. Social bonds can be maintained without physical contact. And most importantly, one can speak about other people in their absence. This is gossip in the literal, technical sense. The transmission of information about third parties, their behavior, their reliability, their reputation. He did not share meat when he could have. She helped when no one else did. They cannot be trusted. They deceived our group. It sounds trivial, negative even, gossip. But it is a fundamental mechanism of social control. It allows a group to know who is reliable and who is not without direct experience with every individual. It is reputation, a phenomenon that exists only through language. Reputation changed how cooperation works. Before reputation, one can cooperate only with those one knows personally, those with whom one has been in direct contact, those whose reliability has been tested through one's own experience. With reputation, one can cooperate with strangers. One can trust someone seen for the first time, if one has heard good things about him from people one already trusts. That expands the network of cooperation. That means larger groups, long-distance trade, alliances between groups, eventually, states and civilizations. All of it grows from gossip, from he said that, lying. But language has a dark side. Language makes lying possible. Pointing to a danger that does not exist is difficult. Pointing can indicate only what is there. False demonstration of food is difficult too, but a word can be spoken about what is not there. One can say there is no predator when there is. One can say, I was there when one was not. One can say he said this when he did not. Lying is the use of language to create a false representation of the world in the mind of another person, and that is enormous power. One of the first documented functions of language in social groups is the management of reputation, one's own and others, including through lies. That is exactly why, alongside language, mechanisms for checking truthfulness evolved. Distrust of unknown people, reputation as currency, systems of verification. Who said it? How does he know? Can he be trusted? And that is exactly why moral rules are so tightly bound to language. Do not lie is one of the very few rules found in the ethical systems of all cultures, because lying destroys the foundation on which the entire social order stands. Trust in words. Language and trust are inseparable. Language and lying are as well. If there is something else language does, and it may be the most important thing of all, it allows us to speak about things that are not here and never were. If we had gone the other way then, what if there had been more animals? Imagine that we move beyond that hill. This is counterfactual thinking. The ability to consider alternatives that did not happen. The ability to mentally unfold alternative scenarios. It sounds abstract, but it is one of the most practically valuable tools of thought. Because from the counterfactual grows planning. If we do this, what will happen? This is the modeling of the future through language. The consideration of options before they happen in order to choose the best. Before language, one could try and fail. Make decisions through direct experience. Went there. It did not work. Now we know. With language, one can try in words. Unfold the scenario in conversation. Find weak points before acting. Learn from errors not yet committed because they were described in words and it became clear what would go wrong. This is the simulation of reality through language. It is what later becomes strategic thinking. Design. Science in its most basic sense. Building a model and checking it against reality. All of it begins with what if. Story. And now, the most important thing of all. Language made it possible to tell stories, not simply to transmit information, but to create a narrative, a sequence of events with causes and consequences, with characters, with tension and resolution. Long ago, when the fathers of my fathers of my fathers were young, this happened. That is a story, not an instruction, not a warning, not information about a herd of animals beyond the hill. It is an event that happened and is worth transmitting because it means something. What exactly does it mean? A moral, a lesson, an explanation of why the world is the way it is. Why one must not do what must not be done. Why one must do what must be done. A story is knowledge packed into form. Knowledge that is easy to remember, because it is in narrative form, and the brain remembers narratives better than lists of rules. Knowledge emotionally charged, and emotion strengthens memory. Knowledge that passes across generations, because stories are told to children, and children later tell them to their children. This is cultural inheritance, not biological, not through genes. Cultural, through words, through stories, through language. Each generation does not begin from zero. It receives the accumulated experience of the previous generations through stories. That means the accumulation of knowledge accelerates. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the one before, not only in technologies but in understanding of the world. This is what makes the human being human. Not the brain. The Neanderthal had a large brain too. Not tools. Tools existed earlier. Precisely this. The ability to transmit accumulated experience through stories, from generation to generation, creating ever greater cultural complexity. Night by the fire becomes different. Let us return to the group. One person told of the herd. Another answered, added something. A third clarified. The conversation unfolds. This is not simply an exchange of information. It is something more. It is the creation of a shared reality. The space around the fire is small, a few square meters, darkness around, several bodies, the smell of smoke and food. But in words, the space is different. In words, there is a river beyond the hill. There is a herd of animals. There are events from 3 days ago. There are plans for tomorrow. There are memories of the last season. There is the one who died and is still remembered. The world in words is far larger than what is visible around them. And everyone who listens is inside that world. Together. Not only in the darkness by the fire, but in the space created by language. This is a new type of bond between people. Not merely physical proximity, bodies nearby, but a shared world in words, a shared reality that exists only because they speak of it and understand one another. This is the first community, not merely a group living together, but a group sharing one world in words. What it meant not to have language. Let us try to imagine, with difficulty, but let us try what it was like without language. You can think, your brain works, you perceive the world, remember, anticipate the near future. You can communicate through gesture, sound, demonstration, but you cannot say what is inside you. Today you saw something unusual, a strange event, a beautiful landscape, a frightening scene. And it is in you. It is an experience, but you cannot transmit it. You cannot share it. You cannot say, I saw this and it was like this. You are alone with it, completely alone. Your entire subjective world is yours alone, closed, inaccessible to others. And your world is only what is around you right now, plus what the body remembers, plus predictions for the near future. Nothing more. Language opened that closed world, released the subjective outward, made the personal accessible to another. Not completely. Language never transmits experience completely. Sunset in words is not the same as sunset. But partially. Enough partially. Enough to say I saw this, and for another person to understand what you saw. This is the end of absolute inner loneliness. We are inside this current. 70,000 years. That is the span from that first complex conversation by the fire to these words you are reading now. Language has changed. The words are different. The grammar is different. Languages became several thousand, because groups spread apart and each developed its own. Then writing appeared. Language recorded, language existing not only while sounded. Then books, which allowed one person to speak to thousands at once, to people he would never meet. Then the internet, which removed the last physical limits on the transmission of words. But it is the same thing, the same principle, the same mechanism, the same foundation. One person creates in words an image of what is inside and sends it to another. And the other receives it. Not fully, never fully, always with losses and distortions, but enough. Enough to meet, not body to body, mind to mind. Not in space, in words. That is the meeting happening right now, between the one who wrote this and the one who reads it. Loss of language. But there is something few people think about. Languages die. There are about 7,000 languages in the world now. By the end of this century, according to various estimates, half will disappear. Perhaps more. Each language is not simply a different way of saying the same thing. Each language is a different way of seeing the world, a different system of categories. Different words for things for which other languages have no words. A different grammar forcing one to think about time or space or causality differently. Hopi, the language of the Hopi people in Arizona, describes time differently from European languages. Not as a line with past, present, and future, but through other categories. That means Hopi speakers may think about time differently. This is not romanticism. It is neurobiology. Language shapes how the brain categorizes experience. Different languages mean different categorizations. When a language dies, a way of seeing the world dies. A version of reality dies that will never exist again. This is a loss, not abstract, real. Like the loss of an animal species, like the loss of the cave lion, which no longer exists anywhere except in drawings. A dying language is also a drawing on the wall, only in reverse. Not what remained, what is disappearing. A word. There is one word that exists in most languages of the world, with very similar sound and very similar meaning. Mama, mother, mama, mère, madre, mutter, mother. It is one of the most conservative words in language, one of the first words spoken by children in all cultures. The sounds M&A are among the first sounds an infant can produce because they require minimal muscular control. This word is almost as old as language itself. That means that across tens of thousands of years, through all changes, through all divergences of languages, through all cataclysms and migrations and forgotten civilizations, this word remained. Mama, the first word, the oldest word, the word spoken by the person beside the fire 70,000 years ago. To the one who gave birth to him, the same word spoken by a child today, 70,000 years, and one word. This is a thread, direct, unbroken, living, from those first words to today. This is language. Night is ending. The fire is burning down. The conversation grows quiet. Not because there is nothing left to say, simply because silence comes. That special silence which exists between people who have spoken a great deal and now sit quietly together. Not empty silence, saturated silence. Because words remain. Not in the air, in the mind. The words spoken tonight are now part of what each listener knows. The herd of animals beyond the hill. Who saw what? What will be done tomorrow? What is remembered from the past? The shared world became a little larger. The shared knowledge became a little fuller. That is language. Not a dictionary, not grammar. This, what happens when people speak and listen and understand. That expansion of the common world that happens every time. 70,000 years. And that has not changed. Every conversation does the same thing. Every word spoken and heard slightly enlarges the space that two or several people share. That is astonishing. What seems so ordinary as to become invisible? What happens thousands of times a day? And every time it is a small miracle. Sounds made by one mouth enter the ears of another person and become meaning there. Images. Understanding. It should not work. It is incredible that it works. And yet it does. 70,000 years. It continues to work. Right now. The next scenario in the series. Hunger. 3 days without food in the steppe. What happens to the body and the brain when there is no food? And why this experience shaped how we eat, think about food, and feel hunger today.